Does anyone else love getting book recommendations of books they already love? If you do, keep watching because that's what we're going to be talking about today in this video. And if you're new here, hi, my name is Tapiwa and I make bookish content on my YouTube channel. And as the title suggests, I'm going to be recommending books that are based off of other books that are more popular, more well-known, to introduce books that have a similar vibe and a feeling or mood or theme that I think that go hand in hand and can sort of add on to the experience of reading the first more popular book. This video is going to help you out if you read a specific book and you love it so much that you want to continue on in that path. So let's get straight into it. The first book that I'm going to talk about is Babel by R.F. Kuang, and this book is extremely popular and I've seen so many reviews of people saying that this book is like 5 stars, 6 stars, incredibly amazing. This book is set in Oxford during the late 19th century and it follows a Oxford student named Robin, and he slowly discovers that the world that he has envisioned, desired and worked towards his entire life might not be as it seems, and that kind of pulls him into action. This book follows a lot of themes such as colonialism, imperialism, the British Empire, and we span multiple countries, and we also explore different perspectives of people living at that time. Even though it's a fantasy novel, it is incredibly based on the real world that we live in, and in some senses you could quite literally draw a one-to-one relation between the novel and the world as it is today. In my own opinion, I found the magic system of this novel to be incredibly interesting and fun to learn about, and it definitely was an amazing read for me, incredibly immersive and educational. Since this book is set at Oxford University, it has a very deeply dark academic theme due to the more serious nature of the book, in terms of like having footnotes and explanations, and also just like feeling like you are a student when you read this book. I really felt that way when I was reading it, and that was a fun little addition to the book. Because of that, my recommendation is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries. This is a fantasy novel and I would classify it more as light academia rather than dark academia, but it essentially follows our main character, Emily. She is an academic at Cambridge University, and so there's that similar like prestigious British university feel to these two books. Although this novel is not set at Cambridge, it is set in a mythical northern country called Lost Land. Emily Wilde is essentially a professor of fairies and she studies everything to do with fae, and she goes to this land in order to discover more. She is publishing research on fairies of Lost Land. Essentially, it's an epic journey of her time in that space, a comforting story about a woman who is a bit prickly in her temperament, but it's also just a fun academic character to follow in a fantasy setting. So that's kind of the similar themes that I found, and also in this novel as well, they're like little footnotes and you really are immersed into the world of academia, almost like you're reading a research paper, kind of like that in Babel, because you are learning more about context of the world that they're building. If Babel represents dark academia, I'd say this book is 100% light academia. The next book that I'm going to talk about is White Nights by Fyodor Dostoevsky, and this book has blown up recently. I think it's because it's a very digestible classic. Classics are usually quite long and quite difficult, but this book is easy-ish to understand but also very short. I saw a TikTok of Jack Edwards saying, "You think you know love until you read Dostoevsky's." But that like perfectly describes this book. A story of a solitary man meeting a woman who essentially changes his life, and I will leave it at that because I hate spoilers, so I'm not going to give any more spoilers. But this book explores yearning, love. This book has a lot of really important and beautiful themes within it, and so if you like this book, I would recommend Swimming in the Dark by Thomas Jodorowsky. This book is a historical fiction novel, follows a young man in the 80s in Poland right after the Berlin Wall fell, while they're dealing with political tension, and we follow our main protagonist through this historical period of time, but also through a sort of love story. This book focuses on queer love. So during the 80s, things were not as accepted, especially in a more Soviet country. This book kind of follows from a different lens, yearning and love and pain. So if you enjoyed White Nights, I think you would really enjoy this book. The next book that I'm going to be talking about is 1984 by George Orwell. This book requires no introduction. It is one of the most prolific classics that exists right now. Every single time I hear someone talking about this book, they always say it reflects the times that we are in so well, which really just goes to show how important and relevant this book stays throughout history, because the concepts and the themes that it follows recur often in society. If you have not heard about this book, it is set in a dystopian society where we follow our main character, Winston, and he is an employee at the Ministry of Truth, and his job is basically to ensure that all articles of publication reflect the reality that the party decides on at any single point in time. This book follows Winston through the dystopian society that he's living in. One of the things that I enjoyed the most about this book was how much Orwell went into devising the language of newspeak, devising the properties of the society, and of course he was inspired by fascism and things like that, but I really enjoyed this book. So if you liked 1984, I would suggest this book, The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. This book was originally published in the 90s in Japan, and it recently got translated into English, and it also was shortlisted for the International Booker Prize. And this book is also a speculative fiction dystopian novel which follows a young author on an unnamed island controlled by the Memory Police, which is tasked with disappearing items on the island. I'm not going to say much more than that, but I will mention that it follows very similar themes of political power, controlling thought, controlling society, fear within the people. I personally rated 1984 a little bit higher than The Memory Police. I do love that The Memory Police leaves things quite open-ended. The next book that I'm going to talk about is Days of Abandonment by Elena Ferrante. This book is somewhat popular. I know it's not the most popular book out there, but it essentially follows a married woman in the heat of summer dealing with her husband's infidelity. It's kind of like the genre of women falling apart, weird girl literature. This book was actually very immersive. You follow this one character in this short span of time as she's processing heavy emotions of losing her marriage and dealing with the responsibility of her children, and also questioning her life thus far, as well as an overall commentary about the role of women in society. And I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was so raw and so intense. It is quite short, and as I mentioned, it's over a couple weeks in summer, so you really are intensely in the story from the beginning, and you really get to watch our main character Olga go through quite a cycle of emotions. And I won't spoil the ending, but it is amazing, every single part of the cycle that she goes through. And if, like me, you also enjoyed that book, I recommend All's Well by Mona Awad. All's Well by Mona Awad is the first book by Mona Awad that I've read. I really do want to read Bunny, but this book is about a theater director at an American university, and she is dealing with chronic pain. I won't mention much more than that, but I will say that the similarities between these two books are that essentially follow a woman and we go through an emotional journey with her. All's Well is more along the lines of magical realism compared to The Days of Abandonment, but this book essentially follows similar themes of being a woman, your experience with beauty, with youth, and also the journey of experiencing the raw and real emotional journey tied to womanhood. So this is 100% a book I recommend if you enjoyed Days of Abandonment. The next book I'm going to talk about is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This book is incredibly popular, and it essentially follows 5 students at a small Vermont university studying classics with a very enthusiastic teacher. It's a murder mystery in a sense, but it's also just like an exploration of deeper themes of the dangers of obsession, the lure of beauty, the complications of human relationship, the weight and guilt of secrets, as well as the corrupting influence of power. And that's kind of why I like this book. It seems very surface level, like you're just following a couple students around, but the themes that show themselves in this book are really deep and really meaningful. It's genuinely one of my favorite books of all time. If you enjoyed The Secret History, I would recommend to you Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. my second time mentioning Dostoevsky in this video. I hope that shows how much I like him as an author, but this book feels comparable to The Secret History because of the similar themes. In this book, we are following a young man who commits a crime, and we essentially watch him as he grapples with the morality behind his actions, as well as understanding the circumstances that led to his choices, and also viewing the situation from a very concentrated lens. The book is quite long, and we essentially get a very detailed description of a short period of time in this man's life surrounding the crime that he has committed. This book, like The Secret History, follows themes of complex human relationships, corruption, the idea of power, the idea of hierarchy within the world, and who is capable and deserving of creating violence in this world. That really resonated to me in a similar way that The Secret History did. And for a little bit of a fun fact, The Secret History actually mentions a line from Crime and Punishment in it. The two books are really interconnected. And the last book that I want to talk about is A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. This book is infamous at this point. Everyone loves it or hates it or falls somewhere in between. It is a literary fiction novel which follows four best friends living in New York, and we essentially follow them throughout their early 20s, a couple decades into their life, and it is such a detailed and beautiful depiction of love and friendship and pain and trauma. It is very, very difficult. This book, I didn't have the easiest time with it, but I 100% appreciate it, and definitely is a top book for me, but not my favorite, but top book for me for so many reasons. And if that's a book that you liked, I recommend Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This book follows the friendship of two people, three, I guess you could say as well, two people that have a shared background and reconnect later in life, decide to create a game, and we essentially follow them as well for a couple of years in their life as this game brings them closer and apart, and we also just navigate the relationships between the characters of this book. These two books immerse you fully into the characters. It also deals with things such as childhood traumas, and they both serve as a depiction of the nuanced relationships that can exist between people. Tomorrow is a lot more light-hearted than A Little Life. It has way less trigger warnings, so if you felt a little bit triggered by A Little Life, I think we all did in some way. This book is lighter and it provides a lot of good moments to it. I remember when I was reading this, I felt like I was just being engulfed in like a cozy blanket because it just felt so nostalgic and fun as well. These two books definitely have a lot of cool similarities between them. So those are all of the books that I'm going to be talking about today, and I hope that was interesting to listen to me talk about my recommendations based off of most popular books that exist. If you liked any of the books that I recommended and they made you think about something that you'd like to recommend to me, please leave them down below. I'm always open to book recommendations. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and also thank you so much for watching this video. I will catch you in the next one.